Ontario has 3 nuclear power facilities operating 18 reactors. That actually makes our province one of the largest nuclear jurisdictions in the world. Late last year, and for the first time in almost a decade, Ontario updated its emergency response plan amid questions and concerns about an aging fleet located in relatively densely populated areas of the province. Joining us now to consider whether we are well enough prepared in case of a nuclear emergency, we welcome Stephanie Smith. She's Director of Operations and Maintenance at the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. Dave Novak, Director, McMaster University's Institute of Energy Studies, and a member of Ontario's advisory panel on the new Provincial Nuclear Emergency Response Plan. Sean Patrick Stenzel, Senior Energy Analyst at Greenpeace. And Teresa McClenahan, Executive Director of CELA, that's the Canadian Environmental Law Association. And we are delighted to welcome you to our program. I think you for the second time. You've been here before. Yes. You two for the first time.
Thank you.
As we consider the issue at hand, let's just, Mr. Director, if you would, bring up this map, which shows in the province of Ontario where the aforementioned nuclear reactors are. There you go, just east of Toronto, you've got Darlington and Pickering. And then just go up and to the left, that's on the eastern shore of Lake Huron, is the Bruce. And then we've got quite a few, as you can see, in the United States and bordering states, which some would argue have an impact on what goes on here, but of course are not under our jurisdiction. But that's what the nuclear power stations in and near Ontario look like. Sean Patrick, I want to start with you. The last nuclear emergency master plan came out in the year 2009. Since then, there was, of course, the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, which I think was the last time we had you on this program. Why do you think it's taken so long to update our plan?
There's a couple reasons. We have 25 reactors, as you mentioned, on the Great Lakes, 18 in Ontario, 7 in the south in the United States. And we have 2 or 3 people within the provincial government that oversee nuclear preparedness. We simply don't have enough capacity to update our plans. And I think the second issue is in my mind, there's a complacent mindset that's set in the provincial government related to nuclear risks. We don't think it's a problem. This is something that happens far away. The risk of an accident isn't high. And the other issue is they just don't think it's their responsibility. After Fukushima, what did the provincial government do? It simply sent a letter to the federal government saying, make sure everything's okay. And it shouldn't do that. The province is responsible for off-site emergency preparedness. The federal government is the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is responsible for on-site safety, but the province has clear jurisdiction over off-site safety, and it hasn't carried through on that.
Let me pick up on one word you said there and put it to Stephanie. Complacent. The allegation is the industry is complacent as it relates to these issues. How about that?
I would actually strongly disagree with that. So after the Fukushima accident that happened in Japan, the industry takes a look at what happens as a whole. We study it, and what we've done at Ontario Power Generation is we looked at that event and then we said, is that something that similar can happen here? And really what happened at Fukushima was the unexpected happened. The tsunami took out their power. So what OPG has done is we've taken a look and put safeguards into place and spent a lot of money actually having backup generators, other ways to add cooling to the reactor, and we've done a lot of that work. In fact, we've actually led the industry in North America in improving our plans to be able to respond to something similar to what happened at Fukushima.
Teresa, fair to say that Lake Ontario is not about to present us anytime soon with a tsunami, and therefore what happened at Fukushima is unlikely to happen here, and therefore we don't really have to prepare for that?
Well, the problem at Fukushima that the official reports noted is that the industry there felt that a big accident couldn't happen, and the regulators and industry there will say that's why the harm was worse there than it should have been. And unfortunately, we do run into that here in Ontario and in Canada. And our message is that big accidents can happen in all complex technology, whether it's nuclear power plants like the CANDU or the Challenger. And the answer is you need to be prepared for an emergency. Yes, we want those extra backup power installed. Absolutely, but that doesn't mean you don't prepare for the most severe accidents so that you can better protect the surrounding population, because there are concrete things you can do to better protect the population if you take those accidents seriously.
Are you saying that we are inadequately prepared today in the event of a big accident?
Yes, that's my view. I've looked at the emergency plans at all of Canada's nuclear plants, and my view is we're not adequately prepared.
Dave, what's your view?
My view is that the province has taken excellent steps to improve the emergency response plan.
So we are adequately prepared today.
I believe we are adequately prepared today. I think the plan has to strike a balance between what you can plan for and the unknown unknowns, as Donald Rumsfeld would say. So I think what the plan, the major update to the plan that's there is this idea of contingency planning zone, preparedness of equipment that can be used in case the unknown happens. We don't know what that might be, but there are now at least provisions within the plan that can address through contingency planning some of those unknown that could occur.
If I can jump in on that, Steve, the contingency plan that's been introduced to the Ontario Nuclear Emergency Plan doesn't actually require anybody to set up in advance where the alternative emergency headquarters would be, doesn't require extra education of the public in that new contingency zone of 20 kilometers, doesn't require distributing potassium iodide to those communities. So in my opinion, what they should have done is take that 20-kilometer number, but make it the detailed planning zone.
I think that the detailed planning zone at 10 kilometers, according to the analysis that was available, is sufficient. What we're talking about is there was a work done by the Royal Institute in London that said what you want to do is examine your preparedness and develop contingency strategies that are flexible and scalable across a wider region for an unknown event. And I think that's exactly what the plan has put into place, is the ability to move equipment and to develop not new equipment, but to perhaps utilize things in different ways.
Let me do a quick follow-up with you. The old plan we used to have versus the new plan we have now, what's the biggest difference?
Well, there was two major differences. The first is that in the process of creating this plan, the government initiated a public consultation process and an expert advisory group. And I think unilaterally, the feedback that we received as an advisory panel from all submissions is that this was a big positive improvement in planning. The second largest change, I think, is this addition of a contingency planning zone, where municipalities must look at alternative community centers in different regions within their municipality that they could use in the event that things unknown occur.
Sean Patrick, would you agree that it is in fact impossible to prepare or plan for every potential eventuality under the sun? You have to bring the issue of, or the notion of likelihood into your thinking. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I think we can do a better job of preparing for events that we've seen in the real world. What our current plan and our old plan didn't do was prepare for accidents where there are widespread off-site effects. Those are the types of accidents that we've seen at Fukushima, we've seen at Chernobyl. So people are displaced in the long term. Right now, our emergency plans only deal with small-scale accidents, like a 3 Mile Island type of accident. So some radiation is released, you need to trigger some emergency measures, but larger evacuations, long-term contamination, how you house people over the long term, none of that is dealt with in a detailed manner in the current plan.
Let me put that to Stephanie. Is that in fact your understanding of things, that these bigger issues as just described are not included?
Well, a couple points I'm going to make. The first one is, my responsibility as the plant manager for the Pickering Power Plant is first to operate the plant so that we never actually have some sort of an accident or large scale. And, I can go in a little bit about what we do. The other thing is, you can't plan for everything, but from the operation of the power plant, I'm responsible to make sure that if an event does happen, that it's mitigated. We have strong procedures. We have strong defense in depth. That means that we have systems that operate independent of one another. So the other point that I want to make is that we just did a large-scale drill. We did that the first week in December, and that involved the station going through an event, a simulated event, and we tested.
Sorry, simulated event of what?
A large-scale release, a large-scale, much like a Chernobyl sort of event. We all simulated it. We had 30 agencies respond, so that tested the ability of the information flow between the power plant and the province and the municipality.
How'd you do?
We did very well. We met all our drill objectives. There was 18 areas of improvement that were found, and we're working through those, and that will be released to the public so they can actually see what the issues that came up during the drill.
Does that give you any added confidence?
No, the drills, again, going back to this fence line, tend to deal with what's on site. what I'm interested in is, do we have adequate measures to protect people off-site Ontarians? 1 in 2 people, the map that you showed, in Ontario live within 100 kilometres of a plant. Do we have those in the province's responsibility? Are those measures in place to protect those people?
Can I just understand that again? You're saying half the people in the province live within 100 clicks of a plant?
If you look at Darlington, Pickering, you've got 4 to 6 million people there within 100 kilometres. You've got Windsor in the southwest, and you have Bruce up on Lake Huron. That's almost half of Ontario.
Okay.
So this is why it is a significant public policy issue in my view. And what we haven't done is say, this is, you asked the question about likelihood. Nuclear risk assessments say accidents are very, very unlikely. In the real world, we've been seeing them about once a decade. And what have other countries done in response to that? Germany, Switzerland, and now Sweden have all decided, instead of preparing for small 3 Mile Island-like accidents like us, they are going to prepare for accidents that cause widespread effects. And what that means is there's tangible public benefit to that. They are expanding their emergency zones, so out to 20 kilometres. So in Toronto, for Pickering, that brings you up to, I think, Victoria Park.
That's the east end of Toronto, Scarborough, basically.
East end, yes, all of Scarborough would be covered. But they will have detailed plans in place for 20 kilometres to evacuate people. And also, out to 100 kilometres, they will have the capacity to monitor for hot spots.
All right, let me ask Dave. Dave, do we have that kind of planning in place?
I think our plans are at a very detailed level to 10 kilometers. So things like busing, transportation, police off-site emergency response teams and how they work.
Do we need to go to 20, though, as Sean Patrick is suggesting?
I think that the distance of 10 kilometers addresses a large spectrum of accidents, from those which Sean Patrick mentioned, all the way up to more severe accidents. And I think that the analysis does not just look at 3 Mile Island type events. The analysis actually looks at a broad spectrum of events involving significant amounts of radiation release. So from my perspective, what we need to obtain is a balance between the risks that we determine from a nuclear accident and those risks that occur from evacuation, from putting planning centers out too far away from where they're needed. It's easy to say we should just evacuate everybody, but emergency planners will know that evacuations hurt people. People are injured or even die during an evacuation. So you have to be prepared as a planner to judge where is the most appropriate distance to put a reception center so that you minimize the impact of the evacuation on the population, as well as making sure it's sufficiently far out so that you minimize the risk of that facility being contaminated.
Tracy, want to come back on that?
Yeah, in Japan, which is often mentioned by the industry as a reason not to evacuate because people did die from evacuation or after evacuation, the reason was that they hadn't imagined that they might have to evacuate vulnerable people, such as seniors needing complex care in hospitals. So many of those people had no health professionals left. They left with their families, and they were evacuated to gymnasium floors with no care. So the reports and the analysis showed that if you had planned for evacuating those facilities, had proper places to take them, fewer people would have died.
Does our new plan incorporate that notion?
No, our new plan does not do that because it's still sticking with 10 kilometers. So what we're saying is that you can't just improvise to 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers, as happened in Fukushima and even beyond, on the fly with vulnerable people in long-term care homes, with hospitals, with kids in arenas and schools in that area, especially since we're in such a populated area compared to Japan or compared to most other places in the world that have nuclear power.
Dave, can I follow up by asking what would be the harm in planning for 20 kilometers as opposed to 10? So
you can imagine a situation where we now put the reception centers even further away. And exactly the same trade-off, the exact same people, those vulnerable population that Teresa mentioned, are now going to be displaced to a further distance. And what you want to do is minimize their time in transit. You want to get them to the care that they need in an appropriate amount of time. And this is really a balance. This requires expert judgment and public debate to assess where those boundaries should be. And by setting the boundaries too far, you may injure people in a certain way, and by setting them too close, you may injure them the other way. So I think it's important for us to really assess and discuss what that tolerable risk level is as a province.
Well, I don't mean to be silly about this, but can you saw it off at 15 clicks and just compromise? I mean, is that how it works?
I think the discussion on where these boundaries should be, 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers or 15 kilometers, is influenced both by technical analysis, technical analysis on dispersion of radiation and weather patterns, as well as by expert opinion on what is an appropriate evacuation for society. And I think the contingency planning zone does ask the municipalities to identify population densities beyond 10 kilometers. It does ask them to identify potential vulnerable locations of people and make sure that the province is aware of where and when these people might need to be evacuated.
Let me follow up with Stephanie on this idea of the dense populations, because it is the case that our nuclear, not so much Bruce, but certainly Pickering and Darlington, are not too far away from where millions of people live. And I'd like a better understanding in your mind as to whether or not the local population knows what to do in the event of some kind of nuclear mishap.
So I will tell you that, OPG does spend a lot of time in the community, and we've actually got very good community support for the continued operation of the Pickering site. I think education is something that needs to, once people understand, they feel a little bit more comfortable. But, my responsibilities are, like I said, to ensure that the plant is operated safely. And, I like to go out in the community and explain. And once people kind of get an understanding of, how the plant operates and the rules and regulations, we do get good community support.
You oversee 6 reactors, right?
I do.
What fail-safes do you have in place so that if there is a malfunction, nothing bad happens?
Okay, so the reactors are can-do designs, so they're much different design, and I know my panel might question me on this, but the can-do design is much different than the designs that were in Fukushima and Chernobyl,
right.
et cetera. Our reactors are, I'm going to say, they're a little bit of a pain to get to operate. You have to kind of coax them up. We do have independent safety systems that monitor parameters independently. One of those safety systems is actually what we call seismically qualified. So in case of an earthquake, we're guaranteed that we're able to shut the reactor down. We have many procedures in place, and we also regularly test our safety equipment to ensure that if it was required to be needed, that it does operate correctly. So we operate the plant based on the design and the safety requirements, and we test to make sure that these things operate. We also do regular drills with the staff to test the ability of the staff to be able to respond to such an emergency. There's qualifications, like myself, I'm what you call an emergency response manager. So if we were to have one of the catastrophic events that we've been talking about, I go to a center. I'm the one that's responsible for making sure that from a technical perspective that the plant is being operated correctly.
If you're alive.
Oh, I'm going to be alive. I'm alive. You know what? I live within 10 kilometers of the Darlington nuclear power plant. And my children actually went to school close to the nuclear power plant. I was always, obviously I work for the company, but my children's school made it very clear. They had brochures. They did drills at the school to make sure that they could get the children out safely, and I've never had an issue working in a nuclear power plant.
Sean Patrick, in your view, how adequately prepared are people who live near these things to respond in the event something bad happens?
Well, I think Pickering is a good stress test of if something were to go wrong at Pickering, it's a good site to say, would our emergency plans be sufficient because it is so densely populated? On awareness, in a Freedom of Information request that I put into OPG a few years ago, I obtained polling by OPG that showed there was fairly low awareness of what to do.
Do you remember the numbers?
No, this is about 2014, but it was fairly low. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission has since required them to start distributing awareness materials, but that's after 40 years of operation. And we have to remember this plant is in Toronto effectively, and population continues to grow. And is everyone aware of what to do? I don't think so. And when it comes to all the technical issues about if an accident were to happen, I'm sure your team is doing a great job, but what we've learned from other accidents worldwide, with Fukushima, it wasn't the tsunami that caused the accident. This was the findings of the investigation committee. It was the fact that they had a blind spot. they actually had the risk studies that show that tsunami could hit the plant. They should have upgraded the plant, and they didn't. This is called regulatory failure. That could happen anywhere, including here. It wouldn't be a tsunami. We will have our own blind spots. But I think we need
A blind spot suggests arrogance.
Can I add
yes,
something?
or complacency.
Arrogance or complacency.
Yes. So, when I first joined Ontario Power Generation, the plants were designed for what we call a design-based accident. So these are accidents that are postulated loss of coolant, loss of containment. After Fukushima, we realized that we had to prepare for the unpreparable. So what we've done is we now have a new set of way of diagnosing issues that are more systematically based. So it's not so much as what caused the big hole, but how to react to it and how to mitigate that event. So we've spent a lot of scientists have been involved. We've got a lot of procedures. We've added equipment just so that we can then deal with something that we haven't thought of before. And we do practice that on a regular basis.
Can I show these? Sure, I can. Camera 2, you want to zoom in on that? That's called rad block. And these are, well, I should get somebody actually who knows about this stuff to explain it. Dave, if something happens, people who live within 10 clicks of a nuclear reactor are urged to take one of the tablets inside here.
So a directive would be issued by the province, usually accompanied with a technique called sheltering, where people would be asked to stay in their local residence or to stay in their local without going outside. And coupled with that would be the recommendation to take an iodine tablet.
And what does that do for you?
The iodine tablet, that's non-radioactive iodine, your thyroid is a gland in your body that has an affinity for iodine, if you like. And by taking the tablet, you fill up your thyroid essentially, and it blocks radioactive iodine that you might be exposed to from accumulating in your thyroid.
And everybody who lives near the plants have got these?
Yes. In fact, I got mine from Darlington.
Can I make a comment about how this came about, though?
Sure.
We only started distributing or delivering iodine pills in 2014. It should have been a decision that the province made. The province is responsible for off-site emergency management. But the decision came about from the federal regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. And that's because they heard in hearings from hundreds of Ontarians how the province was dragging its feet on reviewing the plans, how the plans were inadequate. So they put a license requirement on OPG requiring them to distribute it or deliver them within 10 kilometers. That decision should have been made by the province. It wasn't. At the time, the CNSC said that 10-kilometer zone is arbitrary, but we're using it because it exists and it's the province's decision. Other countries, Switzerland delivers those pills within 50 kilometers. New Brunswick within 20 kilometers. So I think there is a good discussion on, is it adequate enough in the GTA that we're only delivering those within 10 kilometers when in the event of an emergency, people 30 kilometers may need them. How will we get them to people?
I think I would just add, I mean, one thing I caution the public about and my students and so on at the university is that this is not a magic bullet that stops radiation. This protects you from one kind of radiation. I think an adequate response plan involves a mix of items such as that, as well as sheltering, as well as evacuation. And the provincial response plan is really trying to integrate many of those things to minimize the risk to the people living near nuclear stations. What those, the technical benefits of distributing here or there or further, I think these things you can probably look at through several studies. I know the initial location of that distribution is set at a certain distance. What the optimal distance might be, I think, is still open for discussion. At least
right, let's ask Teresa then. Do you think these are adequately distributed right now?
No, right now people within 50 kilometers can ask for them, although that's not widely publicized by the operators.
And get them free?
And get them free. Bruce did send out coupons in their 50 kilometer zone, but OPG has not done that. So that should be done. In the meantime, the committee that Dave just sat on agreed that we need more modeling for the technical backup for things like potassium iodide distribution, which is one of the things I pointed out in responding to the province when I looked at the studies that the province was relying on. Because even though it's not a panacea, that's for sure, and evacuation is extremely important if you can just get people right away from the exposure entirely. But at the same time, in some of the previous accidents, thyroid cancer in children has been one of the primary consequences, like Chernobyl, for example. So it's one thing you can do, and it's early in the accident is the other reason that that's so important. It's so important to have these potassium iodide pills on hand to consume them either just before an actual radioactive release from the plant or within the first couple of hours. After that, their effectiveness tails off very fast.
Gotcha. I wonder, Sheldon, can you bring up the map that we started this discussion with? Okay, we've talked already about the Bruce in the top left corner. We've talked about Pickering and Darlington, which are the plants, of course, that we're responsible for here in the province of Ontario. What we haven't talked about yet, of course, are the American plants, which are actually also fairly close to where people live, and in particular southwestern Ontario, where people in Windsor would presumably be affected by anything that transpired at the two plants that are in its immediate vicinity. And let's go there. Stephanie, how much influence, if any, do we have or contact with our American counterparts to ensure that whatever happens down there, which may not be our responsibility, but which will have an impact on us, we can deal with?
Well, I'll tell you that the nuclear industry is actually a very tight industry. We have what we call the World Association of Nuclear Operations, and that is a forum that we share information. And we also submit ourselves, and the Americans do it too, where we go in and we look at the procedures, the policies, and their response plans for responding to an event from the power plant's perspective, and that's done on a biannual basis for all nuclear power plants in North America. So we look at their operation, determine, the World Association looks at their operation, makes recommendations to improve, and that's shared across the industry. So, we share we use the term OPEX, which is operating experience. We look at that very closely. So any operational issue that occurs in a plant in the U.S., we look at to see if it applies here, and they do the same things. Like I said, we're a tight industry, and we share, and we do learnings, and we help when required. So if there is a requirement for assistance at a power plant in the U.S., we certainly support that.
Because in southwestern Ontario, do people who live in Windsor know that there are 3 power plants not too far away, and we have no jurisdiction over them?
I'm not sure of that answer.
Do you know?
I was down there. Teresa and I went down and met with the Amherstburg Council in the summer, and one of the things that the councillor said to us was, in the 1990s, the province was down here regularly, testing for drills, and we don't hear from them much anymore. And a big problem for those communities, one is awareness, as you mentioned, but the second issue is funding. What happens for the other sites within Ontario is OPG or Bruce Power will cover the costs. In the case of southwestern Ontario with Fermi, it's apparently covered through a contract with the operator of the American station that hasn't been renewed in years. And that municipality is struggling to pay to maintain public safety at equal levels to here in Toronto, which is unfair. And that's something where the government has dropped the ball. The review that they just did not consider how are we going to fund these other sites that aren't near Ontario reactors.
I'd say there is recognition from the province, because if you look at the delta changes between 2009 and the update that came out in December, the issues raised by some of the townships are addressed explicitly, which they weren't there in 2009. And I might agree that prior to prior to this update, not all of their concerns were being addressed. But I think by having a master plan that specifically references those communities and says the province must look after them, this is the first step to correcting the situation.
Dave, I do want to follow up with this, though. The Amherstburg Fire Chief, Bruce Montone, who says, in my 41 years, nothing has ever kept me up at night except this. This is what he worries about.
Yes.
Does he have reason to worry?
I would think that exactly what Sean Patrick said is information and communication and planning has to happen. And I think what was missing in the 2009 master plan is there was some reference to Fermi, but nothing to the specific townships and who is responsible for those townships. Because in the region of Durham, it's very clear that OPG will provide equipment and training to municipal staff in Durham. In Amherstburg or some other townships, that's not the same case. And so I think that the master plan is a very good step forward, at least writing down that the province is responsible and the province must start addressing the concerns of some of these very experienced first responders.
Teresa, let me try this with you. We talked off the top about the fact that Ontario is one of the most nuclear jurisdictions in North America, and many of our plants are near densely populated areas. How common is it for nuclear power plants to be built relatively close to densely populated areas if you look at the whole world.
No, it's not. It's not common, and that's because the International Atomic Energy Agency has a siting guide that says nuclear power plants shouldn't be built next to densely populated areas. And in fact, it says that there should be periodic reviews during the life of the plant to make sure that the population is not becoming too dense around those areas. And it's specifically because of issues like how well could you evacuate, how well could you protect the public. The thing about, Stephanie talked about defense in depth, which is an important concept. And the thing we have to remember is that emergency planning is the last defense. Something else went wrong all the way along the way, and now we have to rely on this nuclear emergency plan to actually really protect people. If it's too populated, it's very difficult to do that.
Okay, but here's the reality. I think it was Premier John Robarts who made the decision more than 50 years ago to build nuclear power plants in Pickering. 50 years ago, Pickering was not a densely populated place. It was a long way away from population, and so we had every right to assume that things were going to be fine. The population has obviously expanded to come to the nukes. You can't move the nukes.
So the province has been making explicit decisions to put more people there. They have the Places to Grow Act, and they've designated Durham, and they've been putting more people there. Even though when we held the hearings, we responded to the hearings about building new nuclear, the Joint Review Panel at the time said to the province, you need to have consultations with these municipalities about the density in this area. They raised concern about that. And I haven't seen anything from the province that's recognizing that they need to not keep putting more people right in the vicinity of Pickering and Darlington.
Stephanie, you want to respond? I mean, I don't know what you do. You can't move the plants at this stage, right?
No, we can't move the plants. And I mean, the best that, like I said, we operate the plant as safe as we can. We actually just received the highest safety rating from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. We subject ourselves to audits on a regular basis by, the regulator, by external people that watch.
I'm only going to jump in because we're down to our last minute and change here. However, OPG's boss, Jeffrey Lyash, just the other day brought the house down on some people at OPG because he was not satisfied with what looked like not 100% attention to safety, right? And he was worried someone was going to get hurt.
Right, and you know what? And that was the exact right thing to do. The project out at the Darlington refurbishment, we've got a lot of people working there. You bring a lot of people in who are used to working at, GM and not to say anything about GM or a welding shop or wherever they're from. And nuclear is a unique industry. And, we have to ensure that people follow the rules, and that includes all of our safety rules. We take those very seriously. We don't want anyone hurt. So, we had to do that. We had to do a course correction, and it was successful, and we've got back on track, so.
Back on track.
Back on track.
Okay. I want to thank all of you for coming in tonight to TVO and helping us understand this issue so much better. Teresa McClanahan from CELA, the Canadian Environmental Law Association, Dave Novog from McMaster University's Institute of Energy Studies, Sean Patrick Stencil from Greenpeace, Stephanie Smith from the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. Appreciate it, everybody. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. Helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.